Yeah.
Well, there wasn't a
That'll
problem.
make the numbers.
There wasn't a
Yeah.
problem. You know, it killed everything, all the foliage, but you know, you were breathing it. Hey, now, don't worry about it.
Yes, you said something very important.
Yeah, Sean?
Most, like when I joined the military, I joined for the educational benefits. You know,
Okay.
and that's when everybody in my unit were going to school to be EMT or going to school to be a paramedic or an ambulance. So that's what draws a lot of the young people into the military. But when a lot of people are getting out of the military today, are feeling disenchanted with the benefits and also the delivery of how do we transpose those job skills into real employment. You know, if I didn't get this specific job that I didn't realize was going to actually carry over into the medical field, or if I didn't get this specific certification while I was in the military, nobody's giving you the knowledge to seek these things out, and you do your service and come out and you're not employed. So
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful thing. And then also, not only that, but housing. How do we create affordable housing for people that have served, who are on our streets, but not just on our streets, but our couch surfing. You know, people that aren't accounted for in the system. You know, the thousands of people that go from house to house looking for a place to get permanent housing.
Yeah,
and that's
Chris, you mentioned some of those problems, but Sean's right. How do you address some of
The
those?
country has always had a long-lasting commitment to provide housing to veterans. We built much of the public housing in the United States after World War II to accommodate returning veterans. That's been the policy of the United States forever, and we're abandoning it today. And to some degree, we're abandoning it because we are engaged in, well, tactical gentrification of the city of Chicago and frankly the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois, it got smaller, but it got wealthier. Average household income jumped 10%. That's nearly impossible to do, to have a shrinking state and increase household income. It occurred not because everybody's got higher wages or bigger salaries. It's occurred because there's been an assault on the poor and the services that the poor rely on. And we've pushed the poor out of our state. Anybody with a disabled child or elderly parent who needs home health care knew that they couldn't count on getting that from the state of Illinois. So we pushed them out of our state. When we have a returning veteran who needs help, may have mental health issues that need to be attended to, that may need supportive housing, wraparound services, we have a choice. Should we fund that, or should we cut off those services and telegraph to them that we don't want them in our state? Move somewhere else, go elsewhere. And I think that's the message today, and I think that's wrong. I think it's a violation of everything we stand for in our country, and I think it needs to come to an end. But that's what I believe is occurring. It's not that we don't know how to provide housing. It's not that we don't know how to provide health care. It's not that we don't know how to treat PTSD. It's that we choose not to. And when you can solve a problem and you don't, well, that's the stuff you go to hell for.
A lot of people argue that there's no money. They say, oh, our state is broke, the budget's out of whack, we haven't passed a budget in 2 years, we just barely passed a budget this time around, so how do we pay for all this stuff?
Yeah, that's not what's going on in the state. It isn't a lack of funding. It's it's the fact that, well, Governor Rauner isn't a Republican in the traditional sense. What he really is a libertarian disguised as a Republican. And libertarian, just like he wears that Carhartt jacket around to make him look like a normal human being or whatever, I don't know. So too has he this other disguise where he pretends to be a traditional pro-business Republican. He's abandoned all of the values of that party. He doesn't reinvest in the economy, and he doesn't reinvest in the people that economy is part of. He doesn't believe in a collective response. He thinks if you're poor, well, it's because you didn't work hard enough. He thinks if you have mental illness, it's because you didn't tough it out. And that notion, that libertarian idea that there's no room for communal action, that's what's happening in our state. When he found out he couldn't privatize the state, he decided, well, instead of shrinking the government, he would try to wound it. He would try to wound it by driving up the unpaid bills so it couldn't function in any other area except to tax people to pay off the unpaid bills. And that, in essence, gives him the smaller government footprint that he sought at the beginning of his term. It's a very dark view, but honestly, it's what I believe, and I think that if you look at every one of his actions, it's totally consistent with that libertarian philosophy. And libertarian doesn't believe that we have an obligation to people even if they've served.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really terrible. You know, the reason why I joined the military was because I was a medical student, and I was actually, you know, doing my rotations, and I went on a surgery ward, and I saw how abysmal the conditions were in the VA system, and how people were being treated. It's changed, it's improved since my time back in the 80s. But when I saw the people, I said, how are we treating these veterans this way? These were honorable people. Some of them had medals under their beds in the dust because they had won medals from flying from World War II. And I said, and Vietnam veterans, and I said, this is it. 2 weeks later, I went and joined the military. And so it was an educational benefit to me too, as far as paying for medical school, but the primary reason was for going in. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the content of your character, going back to what Martin Luther King said, is the content of your character and the way you do things and what you have done. So, you know, by doing the things that you have done, the things that your family has done, there's a tradition there of doing things in a positive light for people in the community, the average person that needs to be helped and needs to, they're not asking for a handout, they're asking for a hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think that notion of seeing something terrible and then jumping in
Yeah.
to fix it, your life story, that's an incredible inspiration for everybody. That's the sort of story that you want to hold up as an example to the millennials who want that to be their story too. They want to know that they jumped in and helped solve the great problems of the day.
Good point. Chris, tell us what else we need to know relative to what you think.
You know, it's one of the areas that we've expanded to up in with Top Box Foods up to northern suburbs of Chicago, up in Lake County, places like Waukegan, North Chicago, Zion, and others. And there's a really interesting dynamic up there in North Chicago where there's a commissary, a grocery store. And it's only accessible to people who are on the base. And it has a couple of interesting ramifications. First, if you price shop it, which I've done a year or two ago, you can't go in unless you're on the base, so I had a friend go in and they shopped it, and then I compared the pricing to a Jewel at the time, and they were being charged more than if they had a regular grocery store in their community. Okay. At the same time, because the military families shop there, the community can't support a second grocery store. So the rest of the people in that community live in a food desert. And all of that's preserved because some government contractor has the right to the contract to provide the commissary, the grocery store, for one of our bases.
Wow.
It's the exact same stuff that Eisenhower warned about at the end of his presidency. This notion that there's this military-industrial complex where there are now vendors. What he was saying is that in the history of the United States, when we fought a war, we went to the car plants and the tractor plants, and we got them to switch and make tanks. But now the military can't operate like that. It needs full-time vendors, so there's an entire supply chain that does nothing but cater to the government and the military. And those people now have a financial incentive to choose and pick our elected officials and to make sure that their friends get appointed to these jobs where they end up with a contract that's screwing the people in the military who are serving our country and screwing the people who live next to them in the poor community like North Chicago. And that's the sort of stuff we need to end.
Yeah, that's scary. That puts a shiver up my spine because I remember being in Iraq, and we were out on a patrol, and we got some news, and we were reading some different information intel that was coming in, and we learned that Halliburton, set up its headquarters in Dubai, and I was like, this is the people who are making our armor. And so it was a scary, this is a scary notion that we have a company that's actually being headquartered in a place that could be compromised by the people who are there. We don't know who's actually in the area. So that is something that it's a shame that especially when people are harmed by those types of arrangements, like you're saying, where they don't get access to food. That could be the books for a child that needs to go to school, that's a service member's child, that they're not making that much money. You don't make that much money in the military. Everyone can pull out their checkbook from the military and count the few zeros that are there. But that's something that I think really needs to be brought out. And that's an excellent point for helping veterans.
Our last few moments here, Chris, as I said, you would be the commander of the Guard, the National Guard. Anything you want to say about the National Guard? Does it need improvement? What have you done?
Well, I'd say this, that we're asking people to fight on behalf of our country if they're called up.
Right.
And as we get deeper into the presidency of Donald Trump, this notion of what differentiated our country from every other country in the world. What was it that we wanted to bring to the world? What was worth fighting for? And I think that you don't want someone who's in the middle of a firefight wondering if it's worth it. And we need to restore to everybody who's in the military this sense that our country is unique in its ability to be a multicultural democracy where anyone can succeed. And we're getting further and further away from that. In our country today, if you're born poor, you'll probably stay poor. If you're born rich, you'll probably remain rich. If you're born in between, you're gonna have a life of constant threat and hazard. And that shouldn't be what we're fighting for. We need to let everybody have an opportunity. And I think restoring the great values of this country is the best thing that we can do for our fighting men and women.
I want to thank you so much for being with us.
Yes.
Really appreciate it. Christopher G. Kennedy, and we'll be hearing more from him, I'm sure. I want to thank all of our panelists here. Thank you, everyone, and we appreciate it.